Sounds good.
Well, thank you once again for joining me here. I'm Kirk here at Pastor's Positive Mental Health Institute, always doing my best to help the church grow and help one another and build one another up in love. And we do that by understanding what it is to have pastors with great mental health and church leaders with great mental health, and how that reciprocates to the congregation, and just a great moment that we can have together as we desire the kingdom of God to grow, as that is the Great Commission, is to go and make disciples of all. And so here I have a wonderful guest with me, Gerard Bolling. Gerard Bolling, excuse me. I'm so glad that you're here with me. And so thanks for taking the time. I just want, before we get into your church and the things that you're doing right now, I just kind of want to hear a little bit about what led you into ministry.
Yeah, I'm excited to be on, everybody. And thank you so much, Kirk, for having me. Um, Ministry has not been a straight line to walk on for me. As a young kid, it was always one of those things that I sort of had a pull in my heart. To help other people. I wanted to love on other people. I grew up in New York City. I was born and raised in New York City. And I remember distinctly that, my family growing up, we had been non-denominational for a while. We had been going to Pentecostal churches, other churches. But, in stepping foot into an LCMS Lutheran church, that's where my sister and I found our home, right? My parents ended up not staying LCMS Lutheran. But what we really had loved about being Lutheran was just the family feel, right, between all the churches and the schools, and the way that those pastors, those leaders at that time took care of us. We grew up in rough environments, rough neighborhoods. And so youth group was like a breath of fresh air, for me. The opportunity to go to like a Lenten dinner, the opportunity to, tack on extra services here or there. Those were always things that I really enjoyed doing. And, in that, I began to, through worship, see myself saying, like, I think I would maybe want to lead that one day, right? Or I could see myself counseling a person. I could see myself, doing these different things. And then my pastor at the time, the sainted Reverend Dr. David Benke, kind of lightly encouraged me to go to this event in the Midwest. I had never heard of the Midwest. I didn't even know it really existed. I thought it was a but I went to this Exploring Church Careers event at Concordia Seminary. I remember praying in the chapel of St. Timothy, St. Titus. I was the first one there. I had flown the furthest. And so I was there really early. The admissions people let me in the chapel, and I prayed, and I really felt God clearly tell me, like, hey, you're supposed to be here. And I was 13, right? And so obviously, I tried to run away from that a lot. I went to Concordia Chicago, studied theater at Concordia Chicago, but then the pre-sem program kind of pulled me in, I tried to go other routes, but, God was like, no, I want you. And I'm glad that I've been following that path ever since.
That's great. So tell me about your current role and your current church. Tell me all about what you guys are doing
Yeah.
and the name of it and what you do, all that great stuff.
Yeah. So currently I serve as lead pastor at Bethlehem Lutheran Church in North St. Louis City. Bethlehem is a dynamic congregation located right in the heart of the city of St. Louis, that really focuses in on youth and family ministry engagement as we implement word and sacrament ministry. Bethlehem has 13 programs that we deploy throughout the year, regular and irregular programs. And we've got something for everybody. In addition to having the Bible studies and the men's groups, the women's groups, all those different things that a church would have. And of course, a church service that is a little longer than your typical LCMS Lutheran church service. It's about, the 2 hour minimum service, I'll say that. But we've gone 4 hours before, Kirk. We've gone 4 hours.
Wow.
Um, it is a congregation that has basketball ministry. We have cheerleading ministry for young girls, helping guys and girls to focus on something else, right? Rather than to be eaten up by the streets. We've got 5 different youth programs all over the city of St. Louis that we deploy after school so that kids have a safe place to go and to eat. We have a feeding program that in the summertime, when we involve summer food in the open site that we're able to feed about 400 different meals out per per meal per day,
Mm.
which is really exciting. We have a van ministry. So, transportation is a major blocker for people getting to church here in the city and getting to programs. So we have our own fleet of vans. God has blessed us with 7 vans that we utilize to do that work throughout the week and then on Sunday morning as well. And then we've got a bunch of different kind of unique ministry opportunities, here and there within that. And we've got an educational ministry too. And so we have an early child care center here at our site, Bethlehem Lutheran Childcare, that last year was, the year before even, we were kind of noodling around, hey, we want to do something in the pocket of kids that are birthed to kind of, that kindergarten age. If you didn't know, by the time that kids are in 3rd grade, they build a jail cell for a kid that doesn't know how to read. And so hitting the reading window really hard is important, and Lutheran educators have a great way of doing that. So we began Bethlehem Lutheran Childcare on our site, and we have since then grown it to 2 other sites. So we ribbon cut another site in North County at Chapel of the Cross Lutheran Church, and then we ribbon cut another site, we're ribbon cutting another site in University City at All Nations Lutheran Church to be able to reach a bunch of little kids for the gospel. And then we've got a K-5 here now with Bethlehem Lutheran School in an innovative micro school model. So it's sort of like a one-room schoolhouse model that our kids are learning in. I've been at Bethlehem in some capacity for the last, my gosh, 12 years. When I say it, it sounds crazy. But I vicared here. This was my fieldwork church. But while I was a field worker, I worked here. I was the associate pastor for some time here with Pastor Schmicky as the senior pastor, John Schmidt. And then, in May of 2022, actually to the day today, Pastor Schmicky passed away. And he actually passed away in the office that I am currently sitting in right now doing the interview. And so it was major trauma for our community to lose a leader who had been here for 30 plus years, who had really helped to rebuild the church and the community around us. And then, of course, a dear friend and mentor of mine. So we went into a very deep, I think, grieving season and grieving mode when it came to that. And we had to rethink a lot of what we did in ministry and our life in ministry here as I took the mantle of senior pastor in May of 2022 when he had passed. And so here we are, May 12th, 2025, right? And things look a lot different at Bethlehem, and we're excited for that too.
Wow, man, I've got you got a lot of things going on, and that's not only a tribute to you, but your predecessor, obviously, who had vision for the community and a heart for the gospel. So with all these different things that you're doing, tell me kind of how you rely on the members of your church.
Yeah. I think in a church like this, you definitely have to have like a core group of staff leaders, right? That we call the senior ministry leadership team. What I focused on, in 2022, when we were kind of regrouping and rethinking, how do we keep this place healthy, right? Because Pastor Schmicky had died very young, at age 59, and we all knew that there was stressors of this job, right, that could have added to that. And we just didn't want that to be what our church was known for, to be the stressful church. And so how could we change that? How could we make that more healthy for our future workers? And so we really quickly identified that we had a need to grow a senior staff team rather than just have 1 or 2 people, be the senior staff members. And so that ministry leadership team sort of serves as that. We called a music minister from Concordia, Ann Arbor, a director of parish music. And so she serves as our director of worship arts, kind of the point person in the worship ministry. Katrina Wallace is her name. We also ended up really, really trying to staff our other ministry areas, actually having a person that was the go-to person for youth ministry, right? Who we're really excited that he's got all the on-the-ground experience to do that. Trevante Brock is his name. And then we went into the season of calling up, had 2 pastors, and we wanted 2 again. But what are we looking for in the second pastor, right? You got to go through that call and discerning process. And so we spent some time on that. We did not pull the trigger quickly, which I was really proud of us on, right? Making sure that we could spend a little time noting who that person should be. And we ended up calling Reverend Christopher Nepper straight out of the seminary. He had done some field work here. He's a fantastic leader, very fantastic mind for like operations and operational leadership, and an all around outstanding guy. And so we're really excited to have him on staff. And then this year, Call Day, we actually added a vicar and we added a deaconess intern who we hope will be our deaconess, right, as well. They will work in different areas, our vicar more so just all around ministry. And then the deaconess intern squarely focused on being kind of the executive director of our childcare ministries as we grow, with multiple directors under her. And so very excited to have that. So that's sort of our senior ministry leadership team, staff wise, and then many staff members who work in between there to operate the ministry. But then we also have, other people who are tapped in our ministry to govern the church, and then people who are tapped in our ministry to, you know, essentially spiritually care for the church, which would be our deacons. So we have 6 men in our congregation that we've elected as deacons that do the calling of people, the checking on them, making sure everything's okay, right? Where my hands or Pastor Chris's hands could not be, they are. And then they'll usually let us know if a situation is elevated with any of our members that we need to look into. And so we're grateful for those 6 gentlemen that are our board of deacons. And then our board of directors governs sort of the whole organization, right? So they're the people we lean on for the policy and procedures or to help enforce those as well, as a board. And so they're really policy based, and more or less there to support Pastor Chris and I in our work. And so excited to have that group of people as well.
Yeah. So, not to be controversial, but you use a term that could potentially, so I've only been with the LCMS for a little over 6 years now. And the deacon thing was a big what to do shortly before I got here. And so you use this term, a board of deacons. So explain that a little bit for especially the LCMS listeners. What does that look like? And how are you defining that?
So our definition of a deacon is sort of interchangeable with what people would call an elder at their congregation. So functionally, whatever they think of as an elder, the guy or the group of guys who are going to be tapped with some of the spiritual care, right, as charged by the pastor, the guys who are going to be there to help people on the ground, right, et cetera, and so forth. That would be the way our deacons really function. And so, if you call them elder or deacon, it would almost be interchangeable.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that we don't ruffle too many feathers. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so can you tell me about a time when you've been built up in ministry?
Yeah. I mean, my first few years here were really formative under Pastor Schmicky, right? He was a fantastic leader, and he really served as a mentor for me in the first few years here. I have grown up in urban ministry, so I think my urban ministry context is a lot different than, the other guys that come through the SEM and they're, experiencing Bethlehem for the first time. So like I grew up with some of these systems, some of these things already in my brain. And so in that respect, I feel like I was able to kind of get things a little faster, right, when it came to serving in an urban context. However, I think for me, just learning the proper tools of encouragement, right, on a day-to-day basis in a place that's not always encouraging. The North Side, really any urban ministry in general, it's hard, right? Things happen that are difficult to process. People die early or people die too soon. People are put in crazy situations just because of the context of where they live or how they live. And kids are victims of things that they should never be victims of, right? And on and on and on and on. So having a way to deal with that and having him as an encourager for me had been wonderful. I've got a lot of other great mentors. Of course, Dr. Benke was a big mentor of mine. Dr. John Nunez was a big mentor of mine. And down the list, Victor Belton, right? A few other people that I can think of off the top of my head who were just excellent men of God who really encouraged me. And then my sister and I, we are like this, man. You got to have a family structure where you're like that. My sister is actually an LCMS deaconess. And so the two of us are like these church workers just out here, that were recently, converted Lutherans, family-wise, compared to all these long lineages of German families. And so having her as a support system is cool too. And the exhaustion of urban ministry especially the mental exhaustion. You got to keep yourself encouraged with your ministry partner. That was the number one thing that I was looking for as we were looking at an associate, right? I got to make sure that I trust them enough to be encouraged by them and them to encourage me. And I definitely have found that in Pastor Nepper. He has been the greatest gift, I would say, in my life as far as encouragement and infusing strength and hope and all those different things. But also, Kirk, we're talking about mental health, right? And mental health is an important topic. 2 years ago, when we had lost, or 3 years ago, rather, when we lost Pastor Schmicky, we went into a stage of really talking about mental health as a church. And we actually found a counseling group, Crossroads Christian Counseling, that was looking to occupy space in the city and county. And so we welcome them into our doors. They're a Christian counseling group. All you do is offer them space. They have their own billing, their own everything, right? And they're located downstairs in our ground level of our church. They've got an office there, and they've got two counselors that see people at different times in the week, one male and one female, both African American, which is a big plus for us. We're a primarily African American Lutheran church. And so I see him every week, Anthony, myself. And so, to break the stigma of mental health in the Black community, I feel like that was important for them to see that I see him. Pastor Chris has also started seeing him, right? Like, we're a community of people that understands that we need that type of help, right? And that health and wellness is important because we can't figure it all out with just opening up the Bible and finding all the answers, right? Sometimes you need somebody else to sort through things with you and encourage you as well.
Yeah, and I would say breaking the stigma, not just in the African community, African American community, but also in the pastoral community. There's a big resistance, even with some of the resolutions that were just passed a couple of years ago for mental health towards pastors. There's still a resistance towards that, and it's difficult because I think that it's one of those things where we would say, hey, if I have a chronic condition or a broken arm or something, I'm going to go to a doctor. I'm going to get the best care. And we never kind of relate psychology. I don't like to use that term because that's weird for people, but therapy, counseling. And it's not that we're discounting the Bible. It's not that we're not saying that Jesus and his word is what sustains us. We're not saying that, but we're also saying there's definitely some tools that is within this world that God has given people wisdom for, that can actually help us navigate some of those things in life. And so I wonder if you could just speak to the stigma for pastors and mental health. And I had a guest not too long ago who pretty much told all pastors, you need to get to counseling. He actually said, don't be an idiot, go to counseling. And so I wonder if you could just speak to the benefits, if you speak to pastors here and church congregations, of why it's essential maybe that's encouraged and practiced in churches.
Man, I'm with that guest of yours that said, everybody get to counseling. Don't be an idiot, right? Honestly, we as pastors, we are standing in rooms that no one else is invited in. You're standing in a room with a person who is absolutely broken most of the time, right? Over some human condition issue. And it's going to be important for you in your health, in your wellness, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, socially, even, right? To be
Yeah.
able to see someone professionally help you sort through the feelings that you're feeling secondhand. Because secondhand, you're picking up those same feelings that your parishioners are dealing with. And sometimes, I mean, we like to say we can leave stuff at the office, right? Or we can leave stuff, we're at the that some of that stuff really travels with you, and you need to download that with somebody. And I a brother pastor say, well, I don't want to pay somebody to listen to me. My wife can do that. Do not burden your wife with
Yeah.
all of the heaviness of ministry that you have promised to take on, right? You have been called as a pastor. Your wife did not get ordained on ordination day, right? It was you. And so making sure that you're able to, have a place where you can put that. And then it also helps to keep your wife well too, because you want her to get the best of you, right? You don't want her to get the dregs because you're dealing with some sort of trauma. Oftentimes my wife is like, man, I really don't have any idea what you are doing during the day. We don't sit there and talk about the secrets of the church at all whatsoever. And that's a good thing, right? And I think there are way too many guys out there that are actually just doing just that, right? And really causing their wife and their family some duress. All those feelings also have to go somewhere too, right? And so you want them to go to the right places. You don't want them to build up in certain factions of your mind and really hurt you in the future.
Yeah. So for those who are curious, it was Pastor Tim Nykirk or Niekirk, depending on how you want to say it, in Texas. He and his wife is actually a therapist and a counselor that is actually on retainer for the Texas district. And so, two-part series, if you want to go back and listen to that, it'd be great. But yeah, I think that the challenge we have, like, so I did years ago, well, 2 years ago now, I did a seminar at the Southern District for the all church workers, and I spent about
Nice.
five sessions and hour sessions, which is really still abbreviating the work that I do on how to help with pastors' positive mental health and how pastors process things. And it's really interesting to see the difference in demographic and what I mean by age group. And you have these guys who have been pastoring for years, who are in their late 60s to 80 years old, and there's just a resistance to this whole idea of getting care outside the Bible and whatnot, and getting care. So how would you counsel a fellow pastor who's like, no, I just gotta, I just gotta read the Bible and pray harder? How would you counsel somebody like that who's going through some trial?
Well, the word of God is living, active, it's moving, it's here, it's now, right? It's the old story of, it's a sermon illustration of the woman who prays in her cupboard with no food. Oh God, would you give me food? Oh God, I need more food. Then she hears a knock at her door, and it's a grocery bag from her neighbor that said, hey, I heard you praying in the closet and I had food and I gave it to you. Well, who gave the woman the food? Was it her neighbor or was it God? I mean, the answer is yes, right?
Right.
God uses the neighbor to do that kind of thing, right? God is using that counselor to provide you some great spiritual care, but God is also using a lot of other things to provide you that mental health care too. I think that one thing that I try to tell our people is like, be well, be in the whole sense of being well, right? So if you every person should have five different hobbies, is what my counselor mentioned. And so a hobby that should keep your mind sharp, a hobby that should feed your soul, a hobby that should be able to have you be active, a hobby that is more of a serious hobby that you have to like take classes on almost, and then a mindset shifting hobby as well. And so do we have all those hobbies? Do we have all those things that would occupy us differently? Because a hobby can feed your soul in a different way, right? And provides a different, piece of mental health. I myself, Kirk, I'm a bonsai guy. I grow bonsai. And so it's a relaxing hobby for me. It's like a Friday, Saturday thing where Friday I'll fertilize my trees that need to be fertilized. Saturdays, I'll wake up really early and I'll discipline the trees. It's time with me and God, right? I pray during that time. I talk to the Lord. I'm able to be devotional during that time, and I do not trade that time for anything. I turn my phone off during that time, right? And so, how do we infuse more stuff like that into our week? Man, brother pastors out there, your parishioners do not want your whole life to just be a nose in a book and then you go home, right? They want you to have sort of this wholeness of life as well. And they want to hear that stuff in your sermons. They want to hear about other sermon illustrations, that you can bring to them because you do other things.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I think just if I could mention what you're saying is, as we create hobbies as pastors, one of the challenges that pastors have in retiring is they have no identity outside of being a pastor. And
Yep.
so if we can create these habits of hobby, so
Yep.
that when we do retire, we actually have things that we're looking forward to and it can
Yep.
occupy our time. And so I really, that's a good word for people. And don't feel guilty about the hobbies. I think that's, and I'm speaking from experience, I think we feel guilty that we do something that is for I call it steward care, but self-care would be the world. The term is, oh, well, I'm doing this for myself, but I'm here to help people. And well, if you take care of yourself, like you're saying with these hobbies, you're going to be better at helping people. And so that's really important. So you've been in ministry several years now. What would you say has been the most challenging aspect of the ministry?
I mean, I got to go back to one of the most challenging moments for me as a pastor was leading through grief. that May of 2022.
Yeah.
That was a challenge that I feel like almost nothing could have prepared me for, right? Losing a pastor beloved by our community, beloved by the greater Lutheran community, and then all of the collateral along the way, right? The shifting of whole leadership structure, the other changes that needed to come with that, the fact that the ministry is dynamic and it, just goes like this at pace, feelings of other congregation members and people who were upset and kind of the energy being taken out on me, that took a mental toll on me as a pastor. And that was a tough season. And I'm still kind of moving out of that season, right? Mentally. I think that that's probably, I mean, not probably, that was the most challenging season to pastor through. And I had to preach sermons nearly every week. And I still had seminarians that were under my guidance, right? And doing all that through grief. I think I probably made a lot of mistakes, right? And I think I also didn't give myself the time to catch up mentally to some of the things that were happening to me. And so, definitely a reason why I sought counseling, not just for me, but for the entire church. And actually, because of that, I have announced this to our board, and our congregation will learn soon enough. And if they listen to this podcast, they'll learn now. But I'm going on sabbatical, not this summer, but next summer, an intentional sabbatical, to sort of heal from some of those things. And so that was a challenge. Also, building an entire professional staff over 3 years has been hard too. And that's essentially what I have had to do, and figuring out the funding model for how to support that staff. Well, should we be spending money that way or not? And if anybody's listening to this and their congregation is in that same boat of like, hey, we're trying to do a lot on very little, because that was very much so Bethlehem, that we were trying to do a lot of ministry on just two full-time people. There were two full-time people, me and Pastor Schmicky. If you need whatever wake-up call is the wake-up call for you, for me, it's that the other guy passed away and there was just one, right? And so I really had to say, hey, church, we got to do something different. But whatever wake up call it is for any other leader out there, you can hire yourself into wellness too, right? To be able to add more workers. God has prepared people who are already supposed to be where you're at, who can join your team or your staff to be able to provide help and relief. And they might be better at doing the stuff that you think you can do really well. And you got to kind of move out the way and let them do it, right? So figuring that out is going to be important as well.
Well, you mentioned a bit of honest humility. That they might actually be better at doing some things than you. And I find that, and it depends on context, obviously, but that is an expectation, I think, that churches put on pastors, especially in smaller congregations, that they have to be good at everything. And so the pastor puts that pressure on themselves to be able to do not only pastoring, word and sacrament ministry, but also, heading children's ministry and doing youth ministry. And it's like, well, they might not be that great at that, but they feel the obligation, they have to do it. And
Yeah.
so over the years, let's go back to a little bit to, so 3 years ago, beloved pastor passed away. You were thrust into this position, and then you had to grow the church in a different way. I really reframe it, is what it sounds like. Can you think of a moment or two where a church member just kind of helped you with some of those moments and some of those challenges?
Yeah. I had an older member of our church who, months before the passing of Pastor Schmicky, came to the back vestry area where we vest, and came down and like went down towards my feet, touched my feet with her hands, and said, "These feet are going to take you places where you don't want to go." And she prayed over them, and I thought it was a very bizarre thing at that time, right? But afterward, I talked with that same congregation member. I was like, man, that was meant for me. Like that was meant for that moment for me, right? That was really helpful to be able to have her as a prayer warrior, and she had been a prayer warrior since then. And so that was wonderful. I've had congregation members, cook me dinner for the 2, 3 months, directly after. So I didn't have to worry about that because I was worried about so much. I was figuring out so much of like the system of how that level of the church worked, right? Because I had a role, an upper level role, but I did not know all of those things, right? That needed to be known. And some of that was buried in his memory. And so, having congregation members guide me through that. I think that our deacons really stepped up at that time. If I really think about it, I got a call from a different deacon every day, for quite some time after his passing. And even if I was busy and I was driving or whatever else, just hearing them over the phone, read the scriptures, say, I'm praying for you. They kept it short, but knowing that people were there for you, that was cool.
Well, and it's interesting. It kind of ties to that idea of going to counseling is this woman who's a prayer warrior, these deacons who come alongside, these people who cook dinner for you. It's the Holy Spirit that's doing that. It's the Holy Spirit that's ministering to you through them. And like Paul said several times, I want Achaeus and Stephanas they refreshed my spirit, or I want to come so that I can refresh you and you can refresh me. God's put us into this community that helps us with one another because we're tangible. It's a little more personal, and God meets us one-on-one with those. It's still, like you said, it's God who provided that meal for that woman praying in her closet. It was her neighbor also, though, right? And so I think that it's important for us to have a healthy perspective and not feel like that God's not using the tools that He has, again, given and gifted the knowledge in this world for people to be healthy. And so I really appreciate how you've tied that in. And again, I also have to say that I think trips to Disneyland and Disney World have probably helped, right?
Yeah, yeah, man, they did. I was just about to mention that. I was like, man, prioritizing family is something huge that I did at this time. And that was important to Pastor Schmicky. Like he had always said he wished he did it more and he wanted me, what he had always mentored in me was like, hey, I want you to focus on your family because your family is your ministry. Did he always do that with his? Not always, right? And so he wanted in the next generation to see that level of focus. And so, my wife loves Disney. I never went as a kid. My wife loves Disney. She absolutely adores it. It's a happy place for her, all that stuff. And so, I made the decision when he passed. I was like, man, I am going to force myself to take these vacations by joining the Disney Vacation Club. And we became Disney adults along with our kids. And so now, whenever we go on vacation, it's somehow involved with Disney. They've got hotels all over the country. It's not just in Florida and California. And so, wherever you go, really, you can say, hey, I'm going to utilize these points to stay here, there, everywhere, right? And we have to spend time with our family so we don't lose our points, right? And so we do that every year, at least twice a year, somewhere around, the middle part of the year, somewhere around Christmas time, and we spend that time together. I'm also this is a very random thing, Kirk, but I am the pastor that rarely is at his church on Christmas. I don't know if you knew that about me. Isn't that weird? I'm rarely at my church on Christmas. I've sort of made it a tradition with my family. When I got there, Pastor Schmicky said, hey, most of my family is located in St. Louis at this point, and so, I want you to travel and go see your family in New York City, right? That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he gave that to me as a gift, and I love that about him, that he gave that to me as a gift. So he always rocked Christmas no matter what, and I didn't have to worry about it. Since his passing, I kind of said to myself, it's at a time of the year that's really stressful. Our Christmas service really occurs about a week before Christmas. Our big service, it's like a play and some other stuff that we do. And so at Christmas time, I go with my family to Disney and I give my wife that gift, right? And we've done that for the better part of 3, 4 years now. And our kids, they remember it, they enjoy it. I love to see my kids mentioning, the positive memories we're making, going to different Disney resorts together and traveling the country doing that. So it's cool stuff. You can't get that stuff back, right? Your kids are only a certain age so long, as we are also only a certain age so long too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just listening to you and fathoming like because I've been in ministry a lot of years and forsook my family, admittedly, and God's been faithful and they're still together, but the family is. But I have two kids that are in ministry and whatnot, and so. But I guess my question is, how do you do that? And because I think it could be a good word for some other pastors here. Not necessarily that all pastors are going to start taking Christmas off now, but how do you do that without feeling guilty?
Yeah. Well, the first answer is you don't. You're gonna feel guilty.
Okay.
You're gonna feel guilty, especially the first few times that you do it. But I think that you have to look and you have to consider the life of the church and consider your family. First of all, the church wants us to take rests. I have never really met a church that says we want our pastor to work themselves to the bone. They don't say that. When they operate together, sometimes they make you feel that, but
Mhm.
it's only because they don't know that they called you at 2 a.m. last night for an issue, but this other person also called you at 4:30 a.m. So you didn't get any sleep because of that. They have no concept of what's happening here, there, or anywhere. So a lot of pastors are villainizing their church and saying they won't let me rest. Well, you have to explain why you need the rest and say when you need the rest. And I'm sure they'll give you the rest once you do that. And so it's one of those things where I think that we have to be a little bit more open about the ways that we feel and the things that we're thinking. And so that's what I try to do is I try to be very open with the congregation and say, hey, this is something that I really need to keep my family whole and well. I also get very afraid. I get very afraid for the children of pastors that feel like they're not prioritized, by their father, who is by default their pastor, right? You have to remember you are pastoring your family too. And so what serves them well, right? If it is that you do Christmas together every year, then it is that you do Christmas together every year, right? And you'll figure that out to make that work. And I know every context is different, but a fun story for me of that is, this year for Christmas, my wife actually got sick on Christmas Day. And so she was not at the parks with my kids and I. She was at the other side of the parks, was really not feeling well, and she was heading home. And my kids and I were headed towards the front to kind of, get her started on the train and everything else so that we can enjoy the rest of the day around the Christmas tree. And there's a girl that just spontaneously broke into song. I think she sang night, right? In Disney, on Christmas by the tree, Magic Kingdom. And then we go up there, and my son, from memory, and because he had to do his reading assignment, he recites half of the Christmas story and then uses the Bible to read the rest of the Christmas story. That was a moment that I got with my kid, and I got to pastor my kid, right? In that moment of saying, hey, look, the church is everywhere, right? And there's all these opportunities to really speak the word of God over people. And that was exciting. And so have those moments with your kids too, right? It's just as important.
Yeah. Well, and if we could stop the statistic of pastors' kids leaving the church, that I think you're kind of tapping on something that maybe will help, not help, because I think a lot of pastors serve the church above their family. And I think that's and so the kids are like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to be part of that? And so that's a good word. I hope people are listening to that. Tell
Yeah.
me how someone in your church has made you smile the last couple of weeks.
Mm. I've got a really big batch of youth and younger kids that are graduating this year. And I'm always grateful for a big batch of a lot of kids that are graduating. But then I also have this one woman from my church who is getting a master's degree. And her story is just amazing of how she had a child at 16 years old. The guy she had a child with, she actually went to marriage counseling with, and they ended up getting married. They had three more kids, and really, school should have been impossible for her. And she should not have had access to that. And, through her relationship with Bethlehem as a church and the people here, she now owns, a business. She has her own nonprofit that she operates as well. She owns her own home. She's got her bachelor's degree, and she just got her master's degree. It just makes me smile to see her have that much joy because of her connection to a Christian community. And so that was really exciting, along with all the kids, right? And all the people that are graduating and achieving something more too. including my own daughter. She's graduating kindergarten this year.
Oh
That's going to be
boy.
a that's my youngest. That's my
Get the driver's
youngest.
license ready, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if you were to sum up just what your desire is for the people at your church, what would you say?
What's my desire for the people at my church? My desire for them is that they would know God, they'd know Him fully and completely. My desire for them would be that they understand community and the benefits of community, not just the parts of it that are ugly that can tear people down, and that they understand that God's not done with them. There's still more work, right, to be done within them, and then also, outside of them as well. And that they would ask for help. I would hope that they'd ask for help and be honest about the help that they need. They'd ask me or they'd ask others for that help too.
Yeah, that's great. Gerard, thanks so much. I don't know if it's still up there, but my first introduction to who you were was on a podcast with you and your sister through Lutheran Hour Ministry. An old elderly gentleman in our church, a 74-year-old at the time, said, "Hey, have you listened to this?" And it was during a rather uh, heightened time in our country, and the voice that you and your sister brought of people, and all I remember from it was people want to hear your story, and we all have story, and I really appreciated that. It was never an us versus them. It was like, hey, especially in the kingdom of God, we're in this together, and you have a unique context. If anyone gets a chance to look up Bethlehem Lutheran Church in St. Louis, it doesn't. It's interesting. There are elements that look like what some people would say, oh, that's Lutheran, but then there are a lot of elements that people are go that doesn't seem familiar to me. And I think that's really in the heart of what the founder of the Lutheran Church, Luther, wanted. I mean, he kind of said it's going to look different from context to context. What we care about is word and sacrament ministry, being faithful to that, and doctrinally holding to the truths that are found in Scripture alone. And so I really appreciate you being kind of carrying on that mantle from your predecessor, and really saying, let's move forward in a creative way and in a way that
Yeah.
meets your community in complete context and serves the community you're in. And it's a good word for me, as I've just moved to El Paso back in November, trying to find, how do we really reach into the community and serve them in the proper way to build the kingdom, obviously, and make much of Christ. And so thank you so much. Anything you'd like to share in closing remarks to pastors or church members?
Yeah, I would say, wherever you are in your context of, where you're serving, just know that number one, you're not alone. There are people that want to support you and they want to love on you. Go to counseling, right? Is the other thing. Go there, do that, do the thing. Have hobbies and things that you enjoy. Maybe even tell your church casually that you're never going to be there on Christmas, right? You might tell them that too. But do what you need to do to keep yourself well. And then if you're ever, interested in a context like Bethlehem, you want to come visit a church with that's kind of on the outlier of, what the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the typical idea of what it would be is, please come visit us. We're right in St. Louis, Missouri. I call St. Louis Lutheran Mecca, right? So you come through here at some time for some reason, at least once or twice in your lifetime. Don't be afraid to don our doors. We'd love to have you in worship at 10:30 until whenever it is.
Until it's done.
Yeah, until it's done. Until it's finished. Bring lunch. Bring lunch. Bring lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I'll put the website in the comments here for people that they can check it out. Because and then also you can follow Bethlehem on Facebook too. And they do. It's just fun to see the joy and the excitement that happens. It's really refreshing. Sometimes, and I want to encourage you too. It's refreshing for other pastors to see that God is working in other places too. And I think it's important for us as pastors to get outside. And it's not to compare. It's not to say, oh, well, God's blessing them. It's to say, no, God is working, and we need to remember that God is always working, and we get to be part of the bigger picture. And so thanks so much, Gerard. Keep up the great work. Congratulations on your daughter's graduation. God bless you and all of that fun stuff as they grow older. And if you like the content on this, please like, share, and subscribe. But feel free to reach out to me, Kirk at ppmhi.org. And with that, we'll build one another up in love and help the church flourish. Thanks, Gerard.
Thanks so much, Kirk. Have a good one.
All right. God bless you, man.